The cavernous ballroom of the St. Regis groaned under the weight of its own opulence. Damon Reynolds felt the pressure in the air, a suffocating mixture of expensive perfume, the faint, metallic scent of ambition, and the oppressive glint of diamonds on 1,000 wrists and throats. Chandeliers dripped crystal light onto a sea of tailored tuxedos and shimmering gowns. The collective elite of San Francisco's tech and finance worlds gathered for the annual philanthropic Vanguard Gala. Tonight, he was their king. The announcer's voice, smooth as aged whiskey, boomed from the speakers. And now, it is my distinct honor to present the Humanitarian CEO of the Year award to a man whose vision has not only reshaped our digital landscape, but has also set a new standard for corporate responsibility and community engagement. The founder and CEO of Horizon Tech, Mr. Damon Reynolds. A wave of polite, powerful applause washed over him. Damon rose from his table, a faint, practiced smile on his lips. He adjusted the cuffs of his pristine white shirt, a stark canvas against his flawlessly tailored black tuxedo. He was the picture of success, a narrative polished to a high gloss, the brilliant mind, the compassionate leader, the man who had built an empire on the twin pillars of innovation and inclusivity. As he made his way toward the stage, weaving through a labyrinth of tables laden with untouched desserts, a figure stepped into his path. Taylor Whitman, his own VP of Operations, blocked his way, a flute of dark red wine in one hand and a smile that never quite reached his eyes in the other. "Damon, congratulations," Taylor said, his voice a low purr of insincerity. "A truly deserved honor. For all you do for the less fortunate." The emphasis was subtle, a surgeon's cut. "Thank you, Taylor," Damon replied, his own voice perfectly even. He prepared to step around him. "Oh, clumsy me," Taylor murmured. In a movement too fluid to be accidental, he stumbled forward. The flute of wine tilted, and a slow, deliberate cascade of deep crimson liquid splashed across the front of Damon's immaculate white shirt. The stain spread instantly, a violent, ugly bloom of color right over his heart. A collective gasp, quickly suppressed, rippled through the nearest tables. The room's ambient hum dipped for a fraction of a second. Cameras, poised to capture his triumphant ascent to the stage, now captured this moment of stark, calculated humiliation. Taylor stepped back, his face a mask of theatrical concern. "My goodness, Damon, I am so sorry. My sincerest apologies. Right on your big night." The stain was dark, like blood. The wine was cold against Damon's skin. The world seemed to narrow to that single point of contact. A cold, wet shock that traveled up his spine and unlocked a memory he had buried for decades under layers of success and tailored suits. The world of the St. Regis ballroom dissolved, replaced by the suffocating heat of a cramped, non-air-conditioned laundry room in a wealthy suburban home. He was 8 years old, hiding behind a wicker basket overflowing with starched linens. The air smelled of bleach and his grandmother's quiet dignity. His grandmother, Esther Reynolds, stood before her employer, the formidable Mrs. Covington. Esther's uniform, a simple gray dress, was as immaculate as she could make it. She was holding a delicate porcelain teacup, one that had been in the Covington family for generations. A small, almost invisible hairline crack ran down its side. "It was like this when I took it from the shelf." "Ma'am," Esther said, her voice soft but firm, the same voice that read him stories and taught him that a man's worth was in his word. Mrs. Covington, draped in pearls even on a Tuesday afternoon, picked up a glass of iced tea from a nearby table. She swirled it, the ice cubes clinking like tiny, cold bells of judgment. "My husband's grandmother brought that cup over from England. Esther, It has survived 2 wars and a cross-Atlantic journey. And you're telling me it simply cracked on its own? Yes, ma'am, Esther maintained, her back straight. Mrs. Covington let out a sigh of profound disappointment. It's always so sad when you can't trust the help. She took a step forward and, with the same casual, deliberate motion Taylor had just used, she upended the glass of iced tea all over the front of Esther's gray uniform. The dark, sugary liquid soaked through instantly, clinging to her, staining her. Accidents happen, Mrs. Covington said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Now, clean yourself up, and the cost of the cup will, of course, be deducted from your wages. Damon, hidden behind the basket, saw it all. He saw the flicker of pain in his grandmother's eyes, a wound far deeper than the public shaming. He saw her jaw tighten, her hands clench into fists at her sides for a single, trembling moment before they relaxed. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply stood there, soaked and humiliated, and absorbed the injustice with a terrifying, silent strength. Later that night, she told him, "They can stain your clothes, Damon, but never let them stain your soul. The most important thing they can't take from you is your dignity. You hold on to that, no matter what." The memory snapped shut. Damon was back in the ballroom. The scent of wine replaced the memory of bleach. The glint of diamonds replaced the harsh fluorescent light of the laundry room. But the feeling was identical. The calculated stripping of dignity. The assertion of power through petty, public cruelty. Hundreds of eyes were on him, waiting for a reaction. They expected anger, embarrassment, perhaps a flustered attempt to laugh it off. Damon did none of those things. He looked down at the garish stain on his shirt, then looked back up at Taylor. His face was a placid mask, his eyes calm, almost serene. But behind that serenity, a cold, ancient anger was crystallizing into something hard and sharp. He was his grandmother's grandson. He would not let them see the stain on his soul. "Accidents happen, Taylor," Damon said, his voice so quiet it was more unnerving than a shout. He reached out and calmly picked a piece of lint from Taylor's lapel. "You should be more careful." He then turned away from Taylor, leaving him standing there with his empty glass and hollow apology, ignoring the whispers and the flash of cameras. Damon walked directly to the stage, the blood-red stain displayed for everyone to see. He didn't try to hide it. He wore it like a declaration. As he reached the podium, he leaned into the microphone. The room fell into a deep, expectant hush. "Thank you," he began, his voice resonating with a new, steely authority. "It is an honor to be recognized tonight. This award is not just for me. It's a testament to the idea that a company can be a force for good, that it can create a culture where every single person is seen, respected, and valued." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, letting the irony of his words, and the very visible stain on his shirt, hang in the air. But as we celebrate our ideals, we must also be vigilant against the subtle poisons that can corrupt them from within. The small acts of disrespect that reveal larger failings. The belief that one person's dignity is disposable for another's convenience. His eyes found Taylor's in the crowd. Taylor's smile was gone, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. He had expected to humiliate Damon. Instead, Damon had turned the humiliation into a weapon, a sermon on the very values Taylor had just desecrated. Damon held up the Crystal Award. "We will do better," he said, his voice a vow. "I will make sure of it." The applause that followed was thunderous, genuine, fueled by the raw drama they had just witnessed. But Damon barely heard it. As he stood on the stage, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlights, All he felt was the cold, damp stain on his shirt, and the icy resolve solidifying in his heart. The war had been declared, not with a bang, but with a spill. And Damon Reynolds, the humanitarian CEO of the year, was preparing to burn his own kingdom to the ground to save it. 2 days later, the sterile, airless tension of the Horizon Tech executive boardroom was a world away from the gala's suffocating opulence. Here, power was not displayed with diamonds, but with silence. The silence in this room, Damon had long known, was heavier than words. 15 floors below, the city of San Francisco bustled. But up here, behind soundproofed, floor-to-ceiling glass, the world was a distant, muted spectacle. Damon sat at the head of the immense mahogany table, the city's skyline a sprawling backdrop to the rot he was beginning to uncover. His public reputation was sterling. Horizon Tech was the darling of Silicon Valley, praised for its groundbreaking AI and its progressive, inclusive culture, a culture Damon had painstakingly tried to build as a tribute to his family's history. His mother, a nurse who treated every patient with the same unwavering compassion, and his grandmother, Esther, who had scrubbed floors so he could one day build skyscrapers. The worn photo he kept in his wallet, Esther in her uniform, his mother in her scrubs. A young Damon between them was a constant, tangible reminder of the dignity of work, a principle he believed was woven into Horizon's DNA. Now, he knew that was a lie. "The numbers don't make sense," Damon said, his voice flat, breaking the heavy silence. He slid a tablet across the polished surface toward Lisa Chen, his CFO, and one of the few people he trusted implicitly. "Our turnover rate among minority employees has jumped 32% this quarter. We're hemorrhaging talent." Lisa, sharp and pragmatic, nodded grimly. "The exit costs alone are a 5-alarm fire. Every senior engineer who walks out the door is a $200,000 loss in recruitment and training. But the real cost is the brain drain. We're losing the very people we need to innovate." Across the table, Taylor Whitman leaned forward, radiating practiced concern. His salt and pepper beard was meticulously trimmed, his suit a study in understated power. He was the picture of a reliable, seasoned executive. "We've launched 3 new diversity initiatives this quarter. Damon, our hiring metrics are phenomenal. On paper, we're a model for the industry." "Paper doesn't tell the whole story." "Taylor," Damon countered, his gaze locking with Whitman's. The memory of the wine stain was a cold spot on his chest. People don't leave good jobs without a reason. They leave toxic cultures. Sophia Patel, the head of HR, cleared her throat. A nervous flutter. "The exit interviews are consistent. They cite culture fit or limited growth opportunities. But those are generic, safe answers. No one wants to burn a bridge." Damon's fingers tapped a frustrated rhythm on the table. He was being handed a perfectly sanitized corporate narrative, while the truth festered just beneath the surface. He felt like a king ruling a kingdom whose language he no longer understood. He knew something was deeply wrong, but the official channels, the data, the reports, they were all designed to obscure, not illuminate. He needed to see the kingdom from the ground up. The idea had been forming since the gala, a radical, almost insane plan solidifying in his mind. But first, he needed one more piece of confirmation. He had a calendar alert, a review for Project Nexus, Horizon's most ambitious initiative, a technology designed to detect and mitigate bias in AI algorithms. The irony was almost too much to bear. The meeting room on the 14th floor hummed with the quiet intensity of engineers. Jamal Williams, a brilliant young software engineer from MIT, stood at the front. He was the lead architect on Nexus, his passion for the project evident in his steady, measured voice and the complex, elegant flowcharts on the screen behind him. He was precisely the kind of talent Horizon was supposed to nurture. Our breakthrough came when we realized traditional bias detection models fail in multi-layered systems. Jamal explained. They check for bias at the end, but the damage is already done. We developed what we're calling recursive fairness protocols. The system audits itself for fairness at every single decision point. Before he could elaborate, Scott Thompson, a mid-level manager with a reputation for being Taylor Whitman's protege, interrupted with an air of casual dismissal. That's a fascinating theoretical model, Jamal. Truly impressive academic work. The word sounded like a compliment, but the subtext was a dagger. For the practical application, however, I think we need something a bit more grounded. The coded language was a masterclass in passive aggression. Academic meant not practical. Theoretical meant not real. Grounded meant simple enough for him to understand. Jamal took a measured breath, his composure unshakable. Actually, the practical application is its strength. Standard models break down when... I think we should move on to implementation timelines. Thompson cut in again, his tone suggesting he was steering the meeting back on track, saving them from Jamal's intellectual meandering. We're spending too much time on theory. Damon, observing from the back of the room, saw it all. He saw the subtle shifts in posture as other team members disengaged, some suddenly finding intense interest in their notebooks. He saw the silent, frustrated glances exchanged between a few of the younger engineers. This was the culture the exit interviews wouldn't describe. 20 minutes later, after Jamal's presentation had been systematically dismantled with polite, dismissive questions, another engineer, Brad Davis, leaned forward. Davis was competent, but lacked Jamal's innovative spark. "What if?" Brad began, his voice full of feigned discovery. "We approach this through a kind of recursive protocol. You know, check each decision layer for fairness separately. That way we could catch bias that traditional methods miss." Thompson's face lit up as if witnessing a miracle. Now that's innovative thinking. Brad, that's the kind of outside-the-box approach we need. Simple, elegant, practical, excellent. The room fell into a stunned, awkward silence. Jamal's expression remained a neutral mask, but Damon saw his hands, resting on the table, tighten into white-knuckled fists. The idea, identical in substance to Jamal's, had been rejected as academic and then celebrated as innovative, merely because it came from a different mouth. As the meeting concluded, Damon watched Jamal methodically gather his materials. A single, coffee-stained copy of his original proposal lay abandoned on the table as the team filed out, most avoiding his gaze. The air was thick with unspoken complicity. Damon stepped back into the hallway, unseen. He had his confirmation. This wasn't a data problem. It was a human problem, a systemic sickness. The reports and metrics were the kingdom's official maps, but they didn't show the real terrain, the hidden walls, the secret toll roads, the treacherous landscapes that some employees had to navigate every single day. That evening, Damon sat alone in his vast corner office. The panoramic view of the San Francisco Bay, usually a source of pride, felt like a mockery. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Marcus," he said when the familiar, gravelly voice answered. Marcus Jenkins, his first boss, the maintenance supervisor who had hired a desperate college kid and taught him the value of an honest day's work. Now retired. Marcus was his most trusted confidant, the one person who had seen him when he was invisible. Damon laid it all out, the metrics, the gala, the meeting, the chilling sense that he was a stranger in the house he'd built. When a system is built to protect itself, Damon, you can't investigate it from the throne, Marcus said, his wisdom cutting through the corporate jargon. The king only ever hears what the courtiers want him to hear. You're getting sanitized answers because you're asking from the top down. So what do I do? Marcus, I can't fix what I can't see. There was a pause on the line, and Damon could almost hear the old man smile. Yes, you can. You just have to change your vantage point. You remember what you used to tell me you learned on the night shift, mopping the floors of the engineering labs. Damon's breath caught. He remembered. You see everything when people think you're not there. Exactly, Marcus said. The janitor is a ghost. A confessional booth. A fly on the wall. People talk around you like you're a piece of furniture. If you want to see the real horizon, don't go in as the CEO. Go in as the man who cleans the floors. Become a ghost in your own machine. The idea, once a radical flicker, now blazed into a concrete plan. It was insane. It was risky. And it was the only way. He looked at the framed photo on his wall, a picture of him at 20, in a gray janitor's uniform, leaning on a mop, exhausted but proud. He had been that ghost once before. It was time to be him again. The transformation was both a shedding and a reclamation. The bespoke suit was replaced by a plain, gray work uniform, the fabric coarse against his skin. The Patek Philippe watch gave way to a simple, functional Timex. He traded the scent of his Tom Ford cologne for the faint, clean smell of industrial soap. In the mirror of his minimalist home bathroom, he saw a stranger and, simultaneously, a long-lost version of himself. He was David Robinson, a new hire for the third-party contracting company that handled Horizon's maintenance. His first day began not in a sunlit corner office, but in a cramped, windowless break room in the sub-basement of his own building. The air was thick with the aroma of stale coffee and microwave burritos, the grimy, honest warmth of a place untouched by corporate aesthetics. Luis Ramirez, the night shift supervisor, a man with kind eyes and hands calloused from decades of hard work, eyed the new recruits. 3 rules, Luis announced, his voice carrying the easy authority of a man who commanded respect without needing a fancy title. 1. You're invisible until something's broken. Do your job, stay quiet, and people will forget you're there. That's how you want it. 2. Everything gets documented in the log. No exceptions. 3. We look out for each other, because nobody else will. Damon nodded, absorbing the simple, powerful code. Luis's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than the others. You're new to this line of work, Robinson, he asked, his tone more curious than suspicious. Is there a problem with my paperwork? Damon asked, his heart hammering. Luis shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. No. Your hands. They're soft. But don't worry, he added, clapping a firm hand on Damon's shoulder. This job will fix that. You're on floors 12 through 15, executive and engineering. Keep your head down and your eyes open. The physical toll was immediate and humbling. Pushing the heavy cart, wrestling with industrial-sized trash bags, the repetitive motion of the mop. It woke up muscles Damon hadn't used in 20 years. But the emotional toll was heavier. He had designed these hallways, chosen the art on these walls, and now he traversed them as a non-entity. People's eyes slid past him, through him. Conversations continued as if he wasn't there. He was a ghost, just as Marcus had predicted. On his third night, while emptying the trash on the engineering floor, he witnessed the system in action. He saw Jamal Williams, working late, being approached by Scott Thompson. Jamal, I need you to prep the full technical appendix for the Nexus presentation, Thompson said, not looking up from his phone. Brad will be presenting the overview to the client tomorrow, so we need him focused on the high-level narrative. Have it on my desk by 7 a.m. Jamal's shoulders tensed. I can do that, but I thought I was on the presentation team for this client. Thompson finally looked at him, his expression one of mild surprise. We need our strongest communicators on point for this one. Jamal. Brad's got a real knack for simplifying complex ideas. Your strength is in the details. Play to your strengths. It was another masterpiece of corporate cruelty, disguised as a compliment. Jamal was being told he was brilliant, but not presentable, essential, but not visible. Damon, wiping down a nearby whiteboard, felt a familiar, cold anger. Later, in the executive wing, he experienced the other side of invisibility while cleaning a glass-walled conference room. He watched Taylor Whitman in a late-night meeting with two other VPs. They were discussing a potential acquisition, their voices casual, their guard completely down. The board thinks we're paying a premium, one VP said. Taylor laughed, a low, confident sound. The board sees the public numbers. They don't see the creative accounting Lisa and I cooked up to hide the debt ratio. This deal is a steal, and by the time anyone figures it out, we'll have already stripped it for its patents. Damon's mop stilled. He was listening to his own VP of Operations brag about deceiving his CFO and his board. The rot was deeper and more pervasive than he had ever imagined. It wasn't just a toxic culture. It was a conspiracy of arrogance and deceit. His first real test as David Robinson came near the end of his first week. He was cleaning the hallway outside Thompson's office when the manager emerged, a cup of coffee in hand. Thompson, distracted by his phone, bumped into Damon's cart, sloshing coffee onto the pristine floor. "Watch where you're going," Thompson snapped, not a hint of apology in his voice. "My apologies, sir," Damon said, his voice the neutral, deferential tone he had perfected. Thompson glanced at him, his eyes narrowing. "You're the one who was in the secure lab the other night. You have an attitude problem." He pointed at the small spill. "Clean that up. And I'm reporting you to your supervisor. We can't have sloppy, insubordinate contractors wandering the halls." An hour later, in the sub-basement break room, Luis called him over. Thompson filed a complaint. Said you were rude and careless. What happened? Damon recounted the incident, leaving out no detail. Luis listened, his expression unchanging, then nodded slowly. That sounds like Thompson. He enjoys making problems for people he thinks can't fight back. He picked up the phone on the wall. "Yeah. This is Ramirez on the night crew. I'm calling about the complaint from Mr. Thompson regarding my guy. Robinson?" "Yes. I have his statement, and I've also reviewed the security footage from hallway 14B. There was a pause. "That's what I thought. The footage shows Mr. Thompson walking into my man's cart while looking at his phone. Robinson apologized, and Thompson became aggressive. I'm logging this as a baseless complaint and an incident of executive harassment of a service worker." "Yes. I'll send the file number. Thank you." He hung up and turned to Damon. "I handled it. But you need to be careful. A guy like Thompson. He doesn't forget. He thinks people like us are beneath him, and he hates it when we don't act like it." "Thanks for having my back, Luis," Damon said, the words feeling inadequate. Luis just shrugged. "Like I said, we look out for each other, because nobody else will." In that moment, Damon understood. He hadn't just gone undercover. He had crossed a line. From a world of performative support and backstabbing smiles to a world of quiet solidarity and unspoken loyalty. He was no longer just the CEO investigating his company. He was David Robinson, a member of the night crew, and he had just learned firsthand who his real allies were. The nights bled into one another, a grueling routine of physical labor and mental reconnaissance. Damon's hands, once soft, began to blister and harden. His body ached, but his mind had never been sharper. He was assembling a mosaic of Horizon's hidden reality, piece by damning piece. The break room became his sanctuary and his primary source of intelligence. Here, stripped of corporate pretense, the maintenance crew spoke the unvarnished truth. "You get the executive floor tonight," David asked Sarah, a woman who had been cleaning Horizon's offices for a decade. "Watch out for Whitman. He likes to leave a single paperclip on the floor in the corner of his office. It's a test. If it's still there in the morning. He calls Luis and complains the cleaning was substandard." "It's a power trip," Luis added, nursing a cup of coffee. "He needs to feel like he's in control of everything, even the dust bunnies." He turned to Damon. "But you know who's the opposite, that young engineer. Williams, Jamal. Always says hello. Knows my name. Last year, my son got into San Jose State for engineering. Jamal heard me talking about it. And the next day, he left a box of his old college textbooks for my boy at the security desk. Most of these people in their fancy offices. They don't even see us. But him, he sees people." Damon cataloged these details. They were painting a clear picture. The culture of disrespect flowed directly from the top, from Taylor and his lieutenants, like Thompson, and the culture of decency, of basic human dignity, survived in pockets, in people like Jamal, who refused to let their own struggles curdle their character. He began to uncover the mechanics of the system, while emptying the shredded paper bins in the HR department. He found improperly discarded documents, drafts of performance reviews. The coded language was undeniable. For white employees, assertive and takes initiative were common praises. For minority employees with the same behavior, the words were aggressive and oversteps boundaries. He saw the shadow promotion tracks firsthand. He overheard a conversation between two of Thompson's favorite engineers. "Did you get on the new Archangel project?" one asked. "Yeah. Thompson said it's the fast track to a senior position. He told me to keep it quiet. Though, it's an invitation-only team." Damon knew for a fact that Jamal, whose expertise was perfect for Archangel, had not been invited. The clues to a deeper, more personal mystery began to surface. One night, while dusting Taylor Whitman's expansive office, Damon saw him on a video call. Taylor's voice was low, but Damon caught a few phrases. "Can't believe it's been 30 years since we left Northwood. No, I never go back. Nothing there for me anymore." Northwood. The name sent a jolt through Damon. It was his own hometown, a small, forgotten industrial city in the Rust Belt that he hadn't been back to in years. It had to be a coincidence. A few nights later, Damon was in Taylor's office again, on the corner of his vast desk, nestled between a leather-bound planner and a ridiculously expensive pen set, was a silver picture frame. It was turned slightly away from the door. Damon's curiosity got the better of him. Pretending to wipe down the desk, he edged closer, trying to get a clear look. The photo was old, faded. It showed two men in work clothes standing proudly in front of a building. A sign was visible behind them. Damon could just make out the words, "And Whitman Steel," before he could see the first name. Taylor's voice startled him from the doorway. "What do you think you're doing?" Damon jumped back, his heart racing. Just dusting." "Sir? Sorry." Taylor strode into the room, his eyes cold with suspicion. He picked up the frame and turned it face down on his desk. "Do your job and get out." Damon fled. The image of the sign burned into his mind. "And Whitman Steel." The pieces were clicking into place with a dreadful, sickening clarity. The shared hometown. The name on the sign. It couldn't be. The following night, armed with a terrible suspicion, Damon knew he had to get back into that office and see the photograph. He needed the final, irrefutable piece of the puzzle. He waited until well after midnight, until the executive floor was a ghost town. Taylor's office was locked, but Luis had given him a master key for emergencies. This, Damon reasoned, was an emergency. His hand trembled as he unlocked the door and slipped inside. The room was dark, illuminated only by the city lights filtering through the panoramic window. He moved to the desk, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. He picked up the silver frame and turned it over. His breath caught in his throat. The photo was just as he'd glimpsed. Two men, young and full of pride. One was a man he recognized from old family albums, his own father, Samuel Reynolds. The other, standing beside him, must be Arthur Whitman. And the sign behind them was now perfectly clear: Reynolds and Whitman Steel. It wasn't just corporate politics. It wasn't just a toxic culture. This was a vendetta, a ghost story 30 years in the making. Frantically, Damon turned on Taylor's desktop computer. He had seen Taylor's password sequence a series of taps on the corner of his screen a dozen times. He replicated it. The screen flared to life. He opened the email client, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He searched for keywords: Thompson, retention, diversity metrics. And then he found it. An email thread titled Development Program Refinements. It was the smoking gun. To Scott Thompson, Andrea Mitchell, James Cooper. From Taylor Whitman. Subject Development Program Refinements. Team. Our Q3 diversity metrics look excellent for the board. To maintain our competitive culture while meeting external expectations, please implement the following. All high-potential diverse candidates should complete at least 8 months under our challenge managers, Thompson, Mitchell, Cooper, before promotion consideration. Continue documenting with the specific language guidelines provided. Communication issues and culture fit concerns are acceptable performance notes that won't trigger HR flags. This approach ensures we maintain our public commitment to diversity while preserving our established culture. As always, this remains within our leadership circle. It was a blueprint for systemic discrimination, a deliberate, calculated conspiracy. Damon felt a wave of nausea. He pulled out his phone and took clear, damning photos of the email, and then of the spreadsheet he found linked within it. A talent development matrix that color-coded employees by race and assigned them to different, unequal tracks. He had the evidence to destroy Taylor professionally, but as he stood there, the old photograph of their fathers in his hand, he knew this was no longer just about his company. It was about his family. Taylor hadn't just been undermining Horizon Tech. He had been systematically trying to dismantle Samuel Reynolds' son's legacy, brick by painstaking brick. The wine stain at the gala hadn't been an act of corporate rivalry. It was an echo of a much older, deeper wound. The revenge wasn't just about business, it was biblical. The revelation that the fight was personal, a multi-generational feud he hadn't even known he was in, changed Damon's calculus. Emboldened by a righteous, cold fury, he pushed his investigation harder, moving from gathering evidence of the system to hunting for the root of Taylor's vendetta. But as he got closer to the truth, the risks escalated dramatically. Taylor, sensing a shift in the currents, became paranoid. He wasn't a fool. He knew the kind of information he possessed was dangerous. Suspecting a leak, he initiated an internal witch hunt. Security protocols were tightened. New encryption was added to executive communications. An email went out to all managers, reminding them of the company's strict non-disclosure policies and warning of zero tolerance for internal breaches. The chill descended most heavily on the engineering floor. Scott Thompson, acting on Taylor's orders, began a series of aggressive performance reviews with his team members, probing for any sign of dissent. Jamal, as the most visible and outspoken member of the team, became the primary target. Damon watched from the periphery as Jamal was called into Thompson's glass-walled office day after day. The conversations were invisible, but the effect was clear. Jamal emerged from each meeting looking more worn down, his quiet confidence eroding under the relentless pressure. One evening, Damon overheard Thompson talking to another manager in the hallway. "Whitman wants me to find a reason," Thompson said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Any reason. A missed deadline, a line of buggy code, a negative comment in a team chat. He's convinced Williams is the source of the morale problem." Damon realized with a jolt of fear that his investigation was no longer a secret. Passive observation. It was having real-world consequences, putting innocent people like Jamal directly in harm's way. He had to act. But revealing himself now would be premature. He didn't have the full story, and Taylor would simply paint it as a personal dispute, a misunderstanding. He needed more. He needed to talk to the one person who might know the whole story. Marcus. He called his mentor from a burner phone he'd bought for the investigation. "Marcus, I need to ask you something. It's about my father and a company called Reynolds and Whitman Steel." The silence on the other end of the line was long and heavy. It was an answer in itself. "I was hoping you'd never have to dig into that mess," Marcus finally said, his voice thick with a regret that was decades old. You knew Damon's voice was quiet, laced with disbelief. You knew Taylor Whitman's family, and my family had a history. I knew there was a history. Son. I didn't know the whole of it. Not really. Your father. He never talked about the end. But everyone in Northwood knew the story. Samuel Reynolds and Arthur Whitman. Best friends. Started a steel fabrication plant out of nothing. They were the pride of the town. For a while. "What happened?" Damon pressed, the word end echoing in his mind. "The 80s were hard on steel towns," Marcus explained. "Foreign competition. Union troubles. They took out a big loan to modernize the factory. A real gamble. It didn't pay off. The company went under. It was a catastrophic failure. It gutted the town. And it destroyed the Whitmans. Arthur lost everything: the business, the house, all of it. He had a breakdown not long after. Never really recovered." "And my father?" Damon asked, his throat tight. "Your father was luckier, or smarter. He had some side investments, some property his father had left him. He managed to land on his feet. He moved your family out to California a year later to start over. For the Whitmans. It looked like your dad just walked away from the wreckage while they were left to drown in it. I know Arthur's wife always blamed your father. Said he could have done more to save the company. Or at least to help them. I guess that kind of poison gets passed down." Damon felt the floor drop out from under him. The betrayal was dizzying. "Marcus, why didn't you tell me when I told you I had a problem with Taylor Whitman? Why didn't you say something?" Marcus sighed, a sound heavy with the weight of his silence. "It was 30 years ago. Damon. I didn't know if the son held the father's grudge. I figured it was just corporate nonsense. I didn't want to open up old wounds for you for no reason. Your father buried that part of his life deep. I thought it was best to let it stay buried. That was my mistake. I was trying to protect you, but I just left you blind. I'm sorry. Son." The apology didn't land. It felt hollow, a small bandage on a gaping wound. Marcus, his mentor, his touchstone of integrity, had known. He had possessed a piece of the puzzle that would have explained everything, and he had chosen to remain silent. The moral clarity of Damon's mission was suddenly gone, replaced by a murky, complicated gray. This wasn't a simple fight of good versus evil anymore. It was a tragedy of intertwined families, of perceived betrayals and inherited resentments. And his most trusted ally had been a silent party to it all. He was truly alone now. The weight of his father's past, Taylor's vengeance, Jamal's precarious future, and Marcus's betrayal settled on his shoulders. He couldn't stay hidden in the shadows any longer. The witch hunt was escalating, and Jamal was running out of time. Taylor and Thompson were building a case to fire him, to make him the scapegoat. Damon knew he had to accelerate his timeline. The plan had been to gather more evidence, to build an airtight case for the board. But now, it was a rescue mission. He had to end this. And he had to do it publicly, decisively, before Taylor could eliminate the key witness to his corporate crimes. The annual shareholder meeting was in 3 days. It was Horizon's biggest event of the year, a showcase of success and future promise, live-streamed to the entire financial world. Taylor was scheduled to give the keynote address on corporate culture. It was the perfect stage, not for a quiet boardroom execution, but for a public reckoning, a place where the truth, once spoken, could not be buried, spun, or ignored. He would confront Taylor not in the shadows where he operated, but in the brightest, most unforgiving spotlight imaginable. The grand ballroom of the Marriott Marquis was a temple of modern capitalism. A sea of investors, analysts, and journalists filled the tiered seating, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of tablets and smartphones. On stage, a massive screen displayed the sleek Horizon Tech logo above the theme for this year's shareholder meeting. Culture is the code. The air crackled with anticipation and the low hum of billions of dollars in invested capital. Backstage, Damon stood in the shadows of a service corridor. He was wearing his gray janitor's uniform, the name David stitched over the pocket. In his hand, he clutched a standard-issue walkie-talkie tuned to the event security channel. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the impending storm. He had used his CEO-level access to override the security protocols for the stage, giving himself a 10-second window. Everything hinged on timing. On stage, Taylor Whitman was in his element, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlights. He commanded the room with the polished confidence of a man who believed he had already won. And so, our success isn't just about our products, Taylor said, his voice smooth and resonant, projecting integrity. It's about our people. It's about building an inclusive culture where every voice is heard, where every contribution is valued, and where the best ideas can rise to the top, regardless of where they come from. We are not just a company. We are a community. We are a family. Damon listened to the hypocrisy, a cold calm settling over him. It was time. He gave a single, terse command into the walkie-talkie. Now. He stepped out from the shadows and walked directly toward the stage, pushing a janitor's cart laden with a bucket and mop. Heads turned. A low murmur rippled through the audience. Security guards started to move toward him, but a voice in their earpieces, Lisa Chen's, ordered them to stand down. Taylor, blinded by the stage lights, didn't see him until he was halfway up the stairs to the stage. His practiced smile faltered, replaced by a flash of annoyance. "Excuse me," he said into the microphone, trying to maintain his composure. "We seem to have a staff issue. Could someone please escort this man out?" Damon reached the podium and stood beside him. He did not look at Taylor. He looked out at the sea of shocked faces, at the live stream cameras that were now zooming in, capturing the surreal tableau, the celebrated executive, and the anonymous janitor. "My name is David Robinson," Damon said, his voice low but carrying with perfect clarity through Taylor's microphone. "And for the last 2 weeks, I've been a member of the night crew on the maintenance staff at Horizon Tech." A collective gasp swept the room. In the front row, Marcus Jenkins stared, his face pale with shock. "I am also Damon Reynolds," he continued, his voice gaining strength. He looked directly into the main broadcast camera, speaking not just to the room, but to the world. "And I am here because the inclusive culture Mr. Whitman speaks of is a lie." Taylor's face contorted, a mask of fury and disbelief. He lunged for the microphone, but Damon held his ground. "He speaks of family," Damon boomed, his voice now filled with the righteous anger he had suppressed for weeks. "Let's talk about family." On the massive screen behind them, the Horizon logo dissolved, replaced by the faded black-and-white photograph of Samuel Reynolds and Arthur Whitman. "This is my father," Damon said, pointing to the image. "And this is Taylor Whitman's father. They were partners, friends, who built a business together in a town called Northwood." Taylor froze, his face ashen. The public facade had shattered, revealing the raw, personal hatred beneath. "A business that failed," Damon continued, his voice softening with a note of tragedy. "A failure that destroyed one family and spared another. For 30 years. Taylor Whitman has harbored a silent, poisonous grudge, blaming my father for his family's ruin. And he has spent his career patiently, systematically working to dismantle my father's son's legacy from the inside." The screen shifted again, displaying the damning email, its text stark and clear for the entire world to see. This wasn't just a personal vendetta. He built a system, a conspiracy to ensure that promising minority employees at Horizon were sidelined, demoralized, and managed out of the company. He called it preserving our culture. I call it what it is: deliberate, systemic discrimination. The talent matrix appeared on screen, the color-coded columns a visual testament to the racist system he had built. "He created challenge managers," Damon declared, his eyes finding Scott Thompson in the audience, who looked as if he wanted the floor to swallow him whole, whose job was not to mentor, but to break promising employees like Jamal Williams, a brilliant engineer who was targeted for removal simply because he was too good to be ignored. The room was in an uproar. Journalists were typing furiously. Investors were on their phones. The live stream viewership counter, visible on a monitor at the side of the stage, was skyrocketing. "This ends today," Damon said. He then turned his gaze to the front row, his eyes landing on Marcus Jenkins. This was the final, most painful piece. But the blame does not stop with him. This kind of evil only flourishes when good people who know the truth choose to stay silent, when they choose to protect themselves from old wounds rather than protect others from new ones. Marcus flinched as if struck. The secondary betrayal was now laid bare, a quiet but devastating aftershock. Damon turned back to Taylor, who stood paralyzed, exposed, his empire of lies crumbling around him in real time. "You tried to stain my honor in public," Damon said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, recalling the gala. "But all you did was reveal the stain on your own soul." He stepped back from the podium. He didn't need to say another word. The evidence on the screen, the story he had told it, was irrefutable. Security guards, no longer taking orders from Taylor, were now ascending the stage, their purpose clear. The glare of the stage lights was blinding. The sea of faces was a blur. The roar of the crowd was a distant, crashing wave. In that moment of chaotic, Public triumph. Damon Reynolds felt no joy, only the profound, soul-deep exhaustion of a man who had been forced to become a ghost, to exorcise the demons haunting his own house. In the immediate aftermath, chaos reigned. The shareholder meeting was abruptly adjourned. Horizon Tech stock was frozen pending an official statement. Taylor Whitman was quietly escorted from the premises, his public execution complete. The next morning, the boardroom felt different. The airless tension was gone, replaced by a vacuum. The board, shocked into action by the public implosion, had convened an emergency session, armed with Damon's evidence and Lisa Chen's corroborating financial data on turnover costs. They moved with ruthless efficiency. Taylor, Scott Thompson, and 2 other managers implicated in the emails were terminated. The HR director was placed on administrative leave, pending a full-scale external audit. The house was being cleaned, violently and thoroughly. But Damon knew that firing the architects of the system wasn't enough. The foundation itself was rotten. 2 days later, he called an all-hands town hall, not in the executive conference center, but in the main atrium, a space accessible to everyone. Employees from every level packed the room. Engineers in hoodies stood next to marketing associates in blazers, and in the front, by Damon's specific request, sat the entire night shift maintenance crew, led by Luis Ramirez. Damon took the stage, not in a suit, but in a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up. "There's no easy way to say this," he began, his voice raw. "I failed you. As your CEO, my job was to create a safe and fair workplace. I built the house, but I didn't see the rot in the walls until it threatened to bring the whole structure down." He laid out the plan for what he called Horizon Reset, a ground-up rebuilding of the company's culture. It was a radical vision of transparency and accountability. Promotions would be governed by public criteria. Performance reviews would be blind to demographic data. And a new, independent Ethics and Culture Council would be formed, with the power to investigate any employee, including the CEO. This council needs a leader who understands this company from a perspective that the executive team has proven itself blind to. Damon announced, someone who has seen firsthand how power is misused when no one is watching. That's why I've asked Luis Ramirez to be its first chairman. A wave of stunned silence, followed by a surge of applause, swept the room. Luis, looking overwhelmed but resolute, stood and nodded to his colleagues. The message was unmistakable. The invisible were now being made visible, and their perspective given power. Jamal Williams was then promoted to head a new innovation fairness team, tasked with creating systems to ensure ideas were judged on merit, not on who presented them. After the town hall, Damon had one final conversation, in a small, sterile conference room. He sat opposite Taylor Whitman, who was there with his lawyer to sign his severance papers, a legal necessity, but a galling one. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, bitter rage. "You think you're a hero?" Reynolds Taylor spat. "You ruined me. You ruined my family's name. All over again." "My father didn't ruin your family, Taylor," Damon said, his voice devoid of anger, filled only with a deep, weary sadness. "A bad economy and a risky loan ruined a business. That's all it was. It was a tragedy, not a betrayal." "He walked away," Taylor insisted, his voice cracking. "He had other resources. He left my father with nothing. My dad spent the rest of his life a broken man, talking about what could have been, whispering your father's name like a curse. I grew up in the shadow of that failure. I swore I would build something bigger than he ever did, and I would tear down the legacy of the man he said abandoned him." "So you spent 30 years consumed by a ghost story," Damon said softly. "You became the villain in a story you wrote for yourself. Look at all the people you hurt, all the talent you squandered, all in the name of this inherited grievance. Was it worth it? Taylor had no answer. He signed the papers, his hand shaking. A man utterly defeated by his own poison. As he was led away, Damon felt no satisfaction, only a profound sense of waste. Later that week, Marcus Jenkins came to his office. The old man looked tired, diminished. "I came to tender my resignation from the advisory board," he said, not meeting Damon's eyes. "I'm not going to accept it," Damon said. Marcus looked up, surprised. "After what you said, how I failed you." "You did fail me," Damon replied evenly. "But your mistake wasn't born of malice. It was born of a misguided desire to protect me from the past. You and we're going to work on the Ethics Council together. Your penance will be to help me build a system where silence is never again an option, where speaking truth to power is not an act of courage, but a daily routine. You're going to help me fix this. Marcus, all of it." Marcus nodded slowly, a flicker of his old strength returning to his eyes. The work of rebuilding had begun. It would be long and difficult, a process not of grand gestures, but of small, consistent acts of repair, honesty, and courage. The fall had been swift and public. The long, slow climb back to integrity would happen one conversation, one decision, one person at a time. 1 year later, Horizon Tech was a different company. It was not the polished, perfect darling of the business magazines anymore. It was something more real, more resilient. The stock had recovered and was now outperforming the market, a fact that analysts attributed to its radical new operational transparency and a surge in innovation from teams that had finally been unshackled. The company's culture was no longer a glossy marketing slogan. It was a living, breathing thing, forged in crisis and tempered by honesty. The anniversary was marked not with a gala, but with the launch of a new philanthropic endeavor, in a modest auditorium at a local community college, before an audience of students, entrepreneurs, and community leaders. Damon Reynolds stood at a simple wooden lectern. "A year ago," he began, "I was forced to confront the history of two families, my own and another, linked by ambition and torn apart by failure. It was a story of blame, of resentment, and of a desire for revenge that spanned a generation. That cycle of grievance is a poison. It doesn't just destroy the person who carries it, it seeps into everything they touch." He paused, looking out at the young, hopeful faces in the audience. "Today, we choose to break that cycle. Today, we choose to turn a legacy of pain into a source of hope." Behind him, a banner was unfurled. It read, "The Reynolds Whitman Foundation." A quiet gasp went through the reporters in the front row. Damon had not named the foundation to honor Taylor, but to publicly acknowledge their shared, tragic history. It was a radical act of restorative justice, an admission that their fates, and their father's fates, were inextricably intertwined. "The Reynolds Whitman Foundation," Damon announced, his voice steady and clear, "is dedicated to providing second chances. It will offer grants, mentorship, and educational funding for families and communities devastated by business failures. Because failure is not a moral indictment. It is often a matter of circumstance, of bad timing, of luck, and how we respond to that failure with grace, or with grievance, is what defines our character." He then introduced the foundation's first scholarship recipient, a bright young woman whose family had recently lost their small business in a market downturn. As she came to the stage, Damon handed her not just a check, but a promise. He shook her hand, and in that simple act of connection, He felt a sense of closure that his public victory a year ago had never provided. He had not just reclaimed his company. He had reclaimed his family's story, transforming it from a tale of feuding and revenge into one of healing and renewal. The ultimate victory, he now understood, was not in destroying your enemy, but in refusing to become him. It was in using your power not to settle old scores, but to build a better future for those who would come after, ensuring they would have the chance to write their own stories, free from the ghosts of the past. His work was not a monument to his own success, but a quiet, enduring tribute to his grandmother's wisdom. They could stain your clothes, but the soul was yours to keep clean, and his was, finally, at peace.